Hi, everyone. It's been a hot minute, but welcome back to the Mindful Urbanist. This is the Sarah and Sage portion of the show where we just talk about general things that matter, hopefully to our lives and your lives out there. Today, we're going to talk about resiliency. We've talked about sustainability up to this point, but the next step after sustainability is resiliency. Sustainability, as a refresher, is can I continue to live my life, whether it's my business, community, or just my own personal life? Can I continue to do what is happening today, ongoing, forever? All right. Resiliency now is all of those what ifs. So let's start with the definition on resiliency, Sarah. I did a little research on this, and I think I found a pretty good one that's succinct and talks about a variety of this. So it says urban resiliency. It refers to the city's ability to withstand, adapt, and recover from challenges, whether those challenges are environmental, like extreme weather, social, such as population changes or population migrations, or maybe local businesses closing down that has a really big impact on the community, or economic, like recessions. Well, we were just talking a little bit like that. I just hinted there. For urban residents, communities, and municipalities, building resiliency is about ensuring long-term sustainability and well-being, even in the face of uncertainty.
I love that. That's a really good example. I feel like one of the things that I hear from that is it's so many things, right? There's, I live in the Northeast and, there's hurricanes and there's, like you said, recessions and there's a million things that could happen. Also, just personally, there's stuff that can happen at an individual level and
Of
my
course.
family. Like, how do you become more resilient given that there's so many things to choose from in order to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So resiliency, when we look at it, it kind of like lights up the veteran in me because being a vet, it was always about redundancy. That was one of the biggest
Mhm.
things in the military was redundancy. We had to
Totally.
have redundancy for this, redundancy
Yeah.
for that, and then redundancies on top of redundancies on top of
Mhm.
redundancies. And it got a little out of hand in some ways, but it's very similar to what we're talking about now. So I'd say maybe to answer this, whether you look at it from an individual standpoint, where I'm trying to look at my household and determine how I can be more resilient as a household, or as a small community, or even a municipality, I think
Mhm.
if you follow like those old school risk matrix, where I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember these, but it was on one axis was like the likelihood that it could happen. That would be like your y axis or your x axis as you want.
Yeah.
And then the other axis would be how severe is it if it happens, or how costly is it. So like
Totally.
if it happens, how much are things going to fall apart?
Yeah.
Right. And so what
Yeah.
you do is you split that into four quadrants up here. And then if it overlaps into the highest quadrant on here, meaning it's the most likely it had happened. And by the way, it's going to be like a really bad day if it happens on there, then those are some of the things that you should be thinking about accounting for. And then the same holds true no matter who you are, whether you're looking at it for your business or your personal household or whatever else. Does that do a good job of answering that?
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, for me as an engineer, especially who worked in healthcare, like we depend on that matrix,
Mhm.
and redundancy is also key, right? If you're making a jet engine, you need to
Absolutely.
think through all those like risks and how to mitigate them. And so,
Oh,
um,
the airplane is like notorious for redundancy on top of redundancy on top of redundancy. That's how planes are built with backups of systems. So yeah, I can totally see.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's such a good way to frame it, like the four quadrants, because you can imagine probably the reason the airplane is like that is because it's probably there is like a high likelihood of occurrence because there's
Hmm.
all sorts of stuff that could happen, and it's a high severity, right? So it would
Absolutely.
be detrimental, catastrophic if it happened. And so do you have an example, like maybe, no one, not probably not everyone in our audience is a airplane engineer. So do you have something like you could like what's the next step you could take if you wanted to be more
Yeah.
resilient
Well,
given
let's talk
all?
about that from like an individual level. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So when we talk about being sustainable, we talk about at an individual, can I continue to live the way I'm living or operate the way I'm operating as an individual and continue to do that long term? So
Hmm.
when we look at those quadrants, we should look at the things that are variables that impact my life, one that are in control and things that possibly are out of control, just so you can understand what's likely to happen. And then measure one like the probability and the severity. So then you can
Mhm.
really start figuring out which quadrants those things fall into. And it shouldn't be too difficult an exercise. You just like think, if I lost my job tomorrow, all right, if I lost my job tomorrow, where does that fall in the risk matrix? And if we look at it like the likelihood of occurrence, hopefully it's low, so it'd be in a low quadrant,
Right.
but the severity would be super high, right?
Mhm.
However, if my car were to break down, and maybe I have a car that's not doing so hot, if that car were to
Right.
break down and lose my ability to get around, that
Yeah.
could actually be high severity or high quadrant or things that we should
Right.
seek to avoid. So I think that
Totally.
would be a good way to look at that. And then obviously the solution is going to be different for everyone, whether
Right.
it's we need to have a backup, maybe a bicycle or an e-bike, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe we just need to build a little bit better relations with those around us, just in case, and maybe warn them. It's like, my car is having some issues on here. If it breaks down, would there be a possibility that you could get me from point A to point B until I could get it fixed? And if you have those backups, or if you have family nearby, then there you go. Like, you don't need to really do much else on there. Was that a good example?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So it sounds like, to sum up, it's like map out map out these things on the risk quadrant or the risk matrix, and
Hmm.
then start, like you said, start mitigating the ones that are in that like severe, very likely quadrant. That sounds great.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I'll do is, for those listeners on here, I'll make sure to see if I can find one of those quadrants on there that has the whole risk analysis or risk matrix, and I'll make sure to put that into the notes.
That's awesome.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Today we're just really looking at resiliency. And resiliency for a lot of us really comes down to, is again those what ifs. And then what how likely is that what if to possible happen, right? And how severe it is. The next thing we're going to look at is regeneration. So up to this point, is sustainable, is can I continue to work the way I want to work? Regeneration, or excuse me, resiliency is, now what are the outside factors that could impact my ability to be sustainable, and let me button up for some of those. And now the final step is, now how can I build this in a regenerative type solution? So not only benefits me, but all those around me and those other stakeholders. So looking forward to it. Happy you came today, and I hope you got a lot out of this. Thank you so much. That's it for Sarah and Sage today. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
It still says stopping.